Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People's Story. I inherited my grandfather's lakefront property about 5 years ago. It's been in our family since the 1950s when he built the original cabin, a cozy two-bedroom place right on Lake Mitchell where we'd spend summers fishing, swimming, and hunting during season. The property is pretty sizable, 12 acres of wooded land with about 400 feet of lake frontage. It's always been our own private paradise, well outside city limits and far from any neighbors. At least it was until Lakeview Estates moved in next door. About 2 years ago, a developer bought up the old Johnson farm that bordered my property to the north. They clear-cut most of the trees and started building what they called luxury lakefront homes, basically McMansions crammed onto tiny lots. Of course, they established a homeowners association right away to protect property values and maintain community standards. I didn't pay much attention to them at first. Their development ended a good 200 feet from my property line, marked clearly by the old stone wall my grandfather built decades ago. I figured live and let live. They could have their manicured lawns and matching mailboxes, and I'd keep enjoying my rustic slice of paradise. That all changed when Patricia Morrison was elected HOA president 6 months ago. She'd moved into one of the biggest houses in Lakeview Estates and immediately started throwing her weight around. The first time I met her, she was marching down my driveway one Saturday morning like she owned the place. "Excuse me," she called out as I was loading up my boat. "Are you the owner of this property?" She said it like my cabin was some kind of crack house. "Yes, ma'am, going on 5 years now," I replied, trying to be polite. "Can I help you with something?" She pulled out a tablet and started tapping away. "I'm Patricia Morrison, president of the Lakeview Estates Homeowners Association. I'm conducting an inspection of all lakefront properties within our jurisdiction. You have several serious violations we need to discuss." I nearly dropped my tackle box. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake. This property isn't part of your HOA. Never has been." Patricia gave me a condescending smile. "Actually, all waterfront properties in this area fall under our association's purview. It's for maintaining consistent standards along the lakefront. Now about these violations. That boat dock needs to be replaced with an approved model. This structure clearly violates our architectural guidelines. And of course, the entire property needs significant landscaping work." "Again, I'm not part of your HOA," I said firmly. "This is private property that's been in my family for over 60 years. You have no authority here." Her smile vanished. "I don't think you understand. The HOA board has final say over all lakefront development and usage in this area. You'll need to submit proper documentation and begin addressing these violations immediately, or we'll be forced to take action." I just shook my head and went back to loading my boat. "Ma'am, you're trespassing on private property. Please leave." "We'll see about that," she snapped before storming off. Over the next few weeks, my mailbox was stuffed with violation notices and threatening letters from the HOA. They claimed I owed thousands in unpaid dues and fines. I called my lawyer, Mike Thompson, who had handled my grandfather's estate. He assured me they had no legal authority over my property and advised me to document everything. Things really heated up when duck hunting season opened in October. I've always enjoyed hunting waterfowl from my property. It's perfectly legal, I have all the proper licenses, and I'm well outside city limits. But apparently Patricia didn't approve of gunshots disturbing her peaceful lakefront community. I was out in my duck blind early one morning when I heard sirens approaching. Next thing I knew, 3 police cars came screaming down my driveway with lights flashing. Patricia was right behind them in her Mercedes SUV. The officers approached cautiously with hands on their weapons. "Sir, put down the firearm and step out of the blind." I carefully set my shotgun down and climbed out with my hands visible. "Officers, what seems to be the problem?" "We received reports of illegal hunting and gunfire in a residential area," one cop explained. Before I could respond, Patricia came charging up. "There he is! I want him arrested immediately. He's breaking multiple HOA regulations and endangering our residents." I calmly explained to the officers that this was private property outside city limits, showed them my hunting licenses, and proved I was the legal owner. They quickly realized Patricia had wasted their time with a false report. "Ma'am," the lead officer said sternly, "you can't keep calling cop for non-emergencies. This property isn't under your jurisdiction and the owner is breaking no laws." "This is outrageous," Patricia screeched. "We'll see what my lawyers have to say about this." True to her word, I was served with lawsuit papers the following week. The HOA was suing me for multiple violations of community standards and trying to force me to join their association. They even tried to claim adverse possession of parts of my land, saying their development's drainage system encroached on my property, which was news to me. Time to fight back. I had Mike file a countersuit for harassment, trespassing, and filing false police reports. We also requested an emergency injunction to stop them from trying to exercise authority over my property. The first court hearing was a thing of beauty. Patricia showed up with two expensive-looking lawyers clearly expecting to steamroll me, but Mike came prepared with original property deeds and surveys going back to the 1950s, documentation proving my land was specifically excluded from the Lakeview Estates development, photos and videos of Patricia trespassing, recordings of the false cop calls, statements from police about responding to bogus complaints, a complete history of their harassment campaign. The judge was not impressed with Patricia's legal team's arguments. They tried claiming that since my property affected the aesthetic cohesion of their lakefront community, they had the right to enforce their standards. The judge shut that down fast. "Let me be absolutely clear," she said. "The HOA has zero authority over this property. Your attempts to exercise control over it are harassment, plain and simple. The injunction is granted. You are to cease all contact with the property owner immediately." Patricia looked like she'd swallowed a lemon, but it got better. The judge wasn't done. "Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges related to the false police reports and harassment. The countersuit will proceed to trial unless the parties reach a settlement." That finally got their attention. Patricia's lawyers practically dragged her out of the courtroom to discuss options. Within days, they were offering to settle. The final agreement was sweet. The HOA had to pay $50,000 in damages and legal fees. They had to publicly acknowledge they had no authority over my property. Patricia had to resign as HOA president. They had to remove all mention of my property from their documents. Any future harassment would result in automatic penalties of $10,000 per incident. The icing on the cake? Patricia had to personally deliver a written apology at the next HOA meeting. I made sure to attend that one. She could barely get the words out through clenched teeth. "I sincerely apologize for my actions regarding Mr. Miller's property. I overstepped my authority and engaged in inappropriate behavior. The HOA has no jurisdiction over his land, and we will respect his property rights going forward." These days, things are pretty peaceful. Patricia sold her house and moved away shortly after the settlement. The new HOA board keeps their distance. They even sent me a fruit basket at Christmas as a peace offering. I still enjoy my hunting, fishing, and quiet lake life just like my grandfather did. The stone wall marking my property line has some new company though. Security cameras covering every inch of the boundary. Just in case any other HOA presidents get ideas above their station. Edit. Holy cow, this blew up overnight. Thanks for all the support and awards. To answer some common questions, yes, this is my primary residence now. I renovated the cabin after inheriting it. The property taxes are actually reasonable since I'm grandfathered in at a lower rate. Several lawyers have reached out offering to share similar cases of HOA overreach. No, I'm not interested in selling to developers no matter the offer. Edit 2. For those asking for more details about the legal proceedings, the judge actually issued some pretty strong language in her ruling about HOAs trying to expand their authority beyond their boundaries. Apparently this is becoming a common issue as developments push into rural areas. My case is now being cited in other similar lawsuits. Also, I found out Patricia had tried this same stunt with two other property owners before me, but they gave in rather than fight it out in court. My lawyer is now helping them pursue their own cases against the HOA. Sometimes you have to stand up to bullies. Update, 6 months later. The HOA drama continues, but justice prevails. Hey everyone, OP here with an update on the HOA situation. A lot has happened since my last post, and I think you'll enjoy how it all played out. Remember how I mentioned that Patricia had tried similar stunts with other property owners? Well, that turned into a whole thing. After my story went viral locally, two other families reached out to my lawyer Mike. Turns out Patricia had successfully bullied them into paying HOA dues and making expensive mandatory changes to their properties, even though they weren't part of Lakeview Estates either. The Johnson family had spent over $30,000 replacing their perfectly good dock with an HOA-approved model, and the Wilsons had paid nearly $20,000 in bogus fines and dues over 2 years. They were furious when they learned about my successful lawsuit. Mike helped them file their own cases against the HOA. When we dug deeper into the HOA-ES records, which they had to turn over during discovery, we found something shocking. Patricia hadn't just been harassing neighbors, she'd been embezzling money from the HOA itself. Remember all those fines she collected from non-HOA properties? Instead of going into the HOA-ES accounts, they were being diverted to a separate administrative account that only Patricia could access. She'd stolen over $100,000 through her various schemes. The HOA board was horrified when this came to light. They immediately contacted the police and the district attorney's office. Turns out that's a felony. Patricia was arrested at her new home 2 states away and extradited back to face charges. I got to testify at her criminal trial last month. Her lawyer tried to claim she genuinely believed she had authority over all lakefront properties, but the judge wasn't buying it. The evidence was overwhelming that this was a deliberate fraud scheme. The moment of justice came when the judge handed down her sentence. Mrs. Morrison, your actions show a pattern of deliberate fraud and abuse of power. You used your position to harass and intimidate innocent property owners while stealing from the very association you claim to represent. This court sentences you to 18 months in state prison, plus restitution of all stolen funds. Patricia's face went white as a sheet. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. The HOA's insurance ended up settling with the Johnsons and Wilsons for full compensation plus damages. They also had to pay for restoring their properties to their original state if they wanted. But here's the really satisfying part. Remember that fruit basket the new HOA board sent me at Christmas? Turns out that was just the beginning of their attitude adjustment. The whole experience taught them a serious lesson about overstepping their authority. They've completely reformed how they operate. The new board president, Tom Wilson, no relation to the family Patricia harassed, came over personally to apologize again and ask for advice on being better neighbors. We actually get along pretty well now. The HOA even changed their policies to require a full legal review before taking any action against non-member properties. They also added criminal background checks for board members after discovering Patricia had a history of similar schemes in other states. As for my property, it's doing better than ever. I used some of the settlement money to renovate my grandfather's cabin, keeping its rustic charm but adding modern amenities. The security cameras have proven unnecessary. No HOA members have set foot on my property since Patricia left. I've actually become something of a local resource for people dealing with HOA overreach. Mike refers cases to me sometimes, and I help folks understand their rights. It feels good to turn this whole mess into something positive. The Lakeview Estates residents seem happier too. Without Patricia's iron-fisted rule, they've relaxed a lot of their stricter regulations. I even see kids playing on their lawns now, something Patricia had banned because it reduced property values. Last week I was out fishing when Tom waved me over from his dock. He'd been thinking about starting a community program teaching kids about lake conservation and water safety. Would I be interested in helping out, completely voluntarily, of course? I said yes. My grandfather always believed in being a good neighbor, even to people who didn't always deserve it. I think he'd be proud to see his property being used to help build community instead of drawing battle lines. Oh, and one last bit of karma. Patricia's fancy lakefront house. It sold at auction to cover her restitution payments. The new owners? The Johnson family. They threw a massive barbecue to celebrate, and you better believe I brought my famous smoked brisket. Life is pretty good these days. The lake is peaceful again, just like my grandfather always wanted it. Though I did install one small addition to his old stone wall, a tasteful but very visible sign reading "Private Property, not part of any HOA," just in case. P.S. A few people asked about the district attorney's investigation I mentioned. They're still looking into other HOAs in the area for similar practices. Apparently Patricia's case opened up quite a can of worms. I'll update again if anything interesting comes from that. Edit. Thanks for all the messages asking how to deal with HOA overreach. I'm not a lawyer, but my advice is simple. Document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to stand your ground. And maybe install security cameras, just in case. The next one is a pro-revenge story. In the mid-2000s, my friends and I would frequent a small billiards place in a neighboring town where you could rent a table by the hour or play per game. We'd play a few games, watch whatever sports were on TV, and have casual conversations. There were no problems and no drama until about 3 months of us visiting this place. A guy shows and takes our spot at the billiards table. No big deal. We were all chatting anyway. 20 minutes later, my friend lets him know we want to play next game, and the jerk is super dismissive. Needless to say, we didn't get in during the next game, so I politely let him know we wanted to play next. Another lady chimed in she wanted the game after us. The guy blatantly ignored me and the other woman, some more time going by and the guy leave the table. We see our chance to get in. We put the quarters in and the balls are dispensed except the green to 6 ball. The guy took it to the bathroom with him. At this point, it was ridiculous, and we notified the manager. The manager noted it was 12:30, and they were going to be calling last call and closing, so he didn't want to make a scene by kicking him out. He gets us another ball so we can play. The guy comes out of the bathroom and knows we realized what he did. He smirks and proceeds to the patio to have a cigarette, bringing along his beer and the green billiard ball. The guy comes back in and tossed the ball he was holding onto the table, hitting a few balls on the table and messing up our game. He goes up to the bar just in time for last call. One of the friends I was with suggested we follow him home and each call the highway patrol to report a suspected drunk driver. 3 of 4 of us agree. So when he leaves, we used our trusty Nextel push-to-talk phones and coordinated several calls to the police. We provided details like license plate, vehicle make and model and color, and mentioned the car nearly hit another vehicle, was swerving between lines and driving erratically. This was under a 15-minute plan. We had no idea where the guy lived, but suspected it was close as he was visiting a neighborhood place, so our time was limited. The one guy who didn't notify the police tailed the jerk and called us giddy when a police officer pulled between him and the guy and turned in his lights to pull him over. The police blotter that week included an arrested of a guy who was pulled over after multiple calls of erratic driving. He wasn't arrested for DWI, but instead for driving on a suspended license. The next one is a malicious compliances story. I work as a school janitor. Half my day is spent in the lunchroom emptying the trash cans and sweeping up. At most schools, you get 15+ minutes in between each lunch period to do all the cleaning. At my school, I get less than 2 minutes if I'm lucky. Normally, if a trash can isn't full, I just dump one can to another and then tie off that bag when it gets full. It's a lot faster than having to replace every bag every time, and it saves a ton of bags. I also sweep up around the tables, and if I see a big mess under a table, I ask the kids to move their feet and sweep that up too. I do it this way because it's the only way to keep up and keep things clean. If I pulled every bag every time instead of dumping one can into another, not only would I run out of bags halfway through the week, but it would also take way longer. If I only swept under tables when there was no kids sitting there, I would literally never have an opportunity to sweep under tables. Enter the lunch ladies. Most of them are nice, but there's this one older one who is just a miserable human being. She yells at everyone, including the kids, and is just always angry about something. Earlier this week, she yelled at me for dumping one trash can into another instead of pulling the bag. Why she chose today to do this? I don't know, since I'd been doing this every day for the past 3+ years. I know how to do my job and didn't ask her opinion, so I just ignored her, didn't say anything, and kept doing what I was doing. Fast forward an hour or two, and I'm getting a call from my district boss that there was a complaint filed against me. The lunch ladies are saying they don't like that I dump cans instead of pulling bags. And they don't like that I sweep under the kids' feet. My boss tells me just stick to cleaning in between lunch periods. I try to explain that that's literally a period of less than 2 minutes, and isn't even a fifth of the amount of time I'd need to do it that way. He says just do it anyway to keep the lunch ladies happy. He's a good dude, but he's just trying to squash complaints and keep them from going further. He says from now on, I'm only to empty trash or sweep the floors in between lunches, where there's not students in the cafeteria, and also, I'm to pull the bags every time. No more dumping cans, cue malicious compliance. Starting then, I only cleaned in between lunches when there was no kids. Of course, this is literally like a knife and a half, so I only had time to get to half the trash cans. And since I was replacing every bag instead of dumping cans, each can took longer. I didn't even have time to sweep at all. The trash cans I couldn't get to would fill up and overflow, and the kids don't care, and just keep piling trash on top. The floor got more and more covered in trash since I didn't have time to sweep at all. I did this for the rest of the week. The same bitchy lunch lady tried to scream at me to go empty the trash when I was standing there on Tuesday. But I explained, I was told by my boss that you guys didn't like me sweeping or emptying trash around the kids, so now I'm only allowed to do that when the cafeteria is empty. I'd love to go get that trash can, but there's kids eating lunch right now, so I'm not allowed. She tried to argue, but I just told her I'm following direct and explicit orders from my boss. There was nothing she could do. When the final lunch ended, I cleaned as much as I could before 2 p.m. and then stopped, as that was my lunchtime and the union requires that we take our lunches at our allotted times. It's non-optional and zero tolerance for deviation. And after my lunch, I have to go clean classrooms since school is out, and classrooms take priority over the cafeteria. End result? The cafeteria never got fully cleaned. When the lunch ladies came in Monday and found it still half filthy, they went through the roof and complained to my boss. He called me Inna, and I explained that I was just follow orders, and the lunch ladies were the ones who asked I do things this way. Suffice it to say, I was told to go back to doing it however I thought was best. You want to stick your nose in my business and tell me how to do my job? See how that turns out. Oh, and also since then, I spent the rest of the week calling them out on all the things they were doing wrong. Previously, I just kept my mouth shut and minded my business, but now we're doing this the way you wanted. Door propped open because it's incredibly hot in the kitchen and you need the airflow. Sorry, that's a security issue. Doors cannot be propped open. Greasy wax paper in the cardboard recycling? Sorry, that can't go in there. Normally I'd just grab it as I see it, but now I waited till the end of the day and then tell them. They had to pick it all out by hand. You guys like having the radio playing in the kitchen? Sorry, not allowed. Shut it down. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.